Muammar Gaddafi. A name that evokes strong opinions. To some, a revolutionary leader, to others, a dictator. His journey from a young boy in the deserts of Libya to one of the world's most controversial figures is a tale of ambition, power, and conflict. But who was Gaddafi, really? And what legacy did he leave behind? Born on June 7, 1942, in a Bedouin tent near Sirte, Libya, Muammar Gaddafi came from humble beginnings. His family, poor and nomadic, lived a life shaped by the harsh desert landscape of northern Africa. Raised in an environment where tradition and struggle were constant companions, Gaddafi quickly learned the power of resilience. Gaddafi's early education was shaped by Libya's political climate. The country, under the rule of King Idris, was struggling with corruption, poverty, and inequality. These frustrations would fuel Gaddafi's eventual thirst for change. After completing his education in Libya, Gaddafi went on to join the Libyan military in 1961. It was here that he began to develop his vision of a new Libya, one that would break free from imperialist influence and the corrupt monarchy that ruled the country. His time in the military allowed him to make crucial connections with like-minded individuals. By the mid-1960s, Gaddafi was leading a small group of officers determined to overthrow the monarchy. Inspired by his admiration for Arab nationalism and the anti-colonial movements in the region, Gaddafi was ready to challenge the status quo. On September 1, 1969, Gaddafi and his fellow officers launched a coup that would forever change Libya. The group, known as the Free Officers Movement, toppled King Idris in a bloodless revolution. The monarchy was dismantled, and Libya officially became a republic. At just 27 years old, Gaddafi became the de facto leader of Libya. He took control of the country's government and its oil wealth, quickly solidifying his power and starting the process of reshaping the nation's future. Gaddafi wasted no time in implementing his vision for a green revolution. He abolished the Libyan monarchy, replaced it with a system of direct rule, and introduced his ideological manifesto, the Green Book. This book laid out his unique interpretation of socialism, Arab unity, and direct democracy. In his Green Book, Gaddafi rejected both capitalism and communism. He called for a system where people governed directly through local councils, with no need for political parties. However, despite his rhetoric of democracy, Gaddafi maintained tight control over the country's political and economic systems, and critics would argue that his form of government was anything but democratic. The 1980s saw Gaddafi assert himself as a prominent figure on the world stage, but also a controversial one. Gaddafi's outspoken support for international revolutionaries, as well as his backing of groups like the Irish IRA, led to strained relationships with Western countries. In 1986, the U.S. launched airstrikes on Libya, targeting Gaddafi's compound in retaliation for alleged Libyan involvement in the bombing of a nightclub in Berlin that killed 2 American servicemen. The attack left Gaddafi's adopted daughter dead, and it became a pivotal moment in his personal vendetta against the West. Despite his defiance of Western powers, by the late 1990s and early 2000s, Gaddafi began to shift his foreign policy. Libya sought to end its isolation by curbing its support for terrorism and agreeing to dismantle its weapons of mass destruction programs. This shift culminated in 2003 when Libya renounced its nuclear weapons program and took responsibility for the 1988 Lockerbie bombing. Gaddafi was welcomed back into the international fold, and Libya's oil industry flourished. He was seen by some as a statesman working for peace, while others believed it was simply a calculated move to secure his regime. However, Gaddafi's reign would come to a violent end during the Arab Spring of 2011. Inspired by protests across the region, Libyans rose up against Gaddafi's 42-year rule. Initially, protests were met with violent repression. As the rebellion grew stronger, Gaddafi's forces launched brutal attacks on civilians. In response to the escalating violence, NATO intervened, launching airstrikes to support the opposition. The conflict ultimately led to Gaddafi's downfall. After months of intense fighting, Gaddafi was captured by rebel forces on October 20, 2011, in his hometown of Sirte. Muammar Gaddafi's death marked the end of an era for Libya. But the power vacuum left behind plunged the country into years of instability and civil war. His legacy is a complex one. While some praise his efforts to modernize Libya and reduce poverty, others point to his oppressive rule, human rights abuses, and the many lives lost during his reign. To this day, Libya remains fractured, struggling with competing factions and the aftermath of Gaddafi's regime. Was he a visionary leader? Or was he simply another tyrant who used the language of revolution to maintain absolute power? Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life of Muammar Gaddafi. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most fascinating figures.